Welcome back to Legitimate Targets, everybody. It's Jackson Hinkle. I got a very special interview for you all today. You're not going to want to miss it, so stick around. We're going to be talking about all things BRICS, multipolar, multinodal world. We're going to be talking about Israel, Middle East, Russia, you name it, with none other than Pepe Escobar. He is an expert geopolitical analyst. He has been predicting exactly what is playing out right now for decades and decades. He had the vision long before everyone else did, long before everyone else actually began to understand what's happening. And frankly, I still don't understand what's happening. So that's why I have Pepe here today with me. He is an analyst, as I said, a journalist. You can find his work in Sputnik, Strategic Culture, The Cradle, Zero Hedge, which I read quite often. Pepe Escobar, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Thanks, and great to be here, Jackson.
You know, whenever I have questions about what's happening in the world, I always go to you first. And, you know, we don't see each other in person that often, but I think we're going to see more and more of each other in the near future. And look, I mean, I think the first thing that we have to address, I woke up this morning and I saw on my phone horrible videos of Israel burning people alive in Gaza. They're obviously trying to do these attacks on southern Lebanon. And you've been speaking out a lot against this within the context of multipolarity and U.S. imperialism. What do you make of what Israel's doing right now? How does a country that has such little regard, if any, for human life continue to exist?
Well, this is probably the two most important weeks of the 21st century. The potential is there. The BRICS summit in Kazan. This is the preparation week. There are very, very important meetings here in Moscow, and next week in Kazan. The problem is, right in the middle of something that can be a real game changer in international relations, we have a genocide and a subsect of the forever wars going on in West Asia. So this is irreconcilable. So one side we have forever wars, fully condoned by the collective West. What's happening in Gaza is beyond any description. Like you said, burning children alive in refugee tents outside of a hospital. Can you believe that in the early 21st century we are facing this, and with our impotent rage, we cannot change it? There's one actor who could change it, the United States of America. Are they going to change it? No, we already know that. And at the same time, here, on this part of the planet, deep in Eurasia, the BRICS and the BRICS partners, BRICS outreach, the expanded BRICS, are trying to forge, Ambassador Chas Freeman has the right expression, the multinodal world, which is a series of interconnected nodes, geoeconomically, geopolitically. So from an Asian point of view, it's an auspicious view of the future. So these views are clashing these next weeks like never before. So our hope is that the global majority already sees what's playing, and this drive in Kazan next week towards multipolarity will pick up heavy momentum.
Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, has said that he's not going to be attending the BRICS summit. Saudi Arabia's membership in BRICS has been in somewhat of a limbo. You can speak more to that.
Of course.
How do you think this conflict playing out in the Middle East, which is somewhat, divided along these faith-based lines, with the Gulf states choosing to kind of go in the direction of aiding and abetting Israel in some ways, not cutting off all ties with Israel. You have the Shia order in the region is going full support for Palestine, Lebanon, so on and so forth. How do you think this is going to impact the multinodal, era that is evolving right now?
It's an excellent question, Jackson, because this pits the axis of resistance, which is essentially Shiite, against, I would say, the thunderous silence of many top Arab world players. And in some cases, even worse, they are collaborationists, like Jordan and Egypt especially. Thunderous silence, especially from two new BRICS members, or I would say 1.5. The Emirates, which is a full BRICS member, and Saudi Arabia, as I confirmed last week in Istanbul, they are still hedging their bets. They're sending their foreign minister to Kazan. MBS is not going. There's no justification for that apart from MBS is afraid to leave Saudi because, those rumors of a coup, they are there all the time. So this is the only rational explanation for that, But on the other hand, we have the role of Turkey, which is very interesting. We learned this weekend that Erdogan is going to have 3 bilaterals in Kazan. Putin, Xi, and Modi. So he's going to talk to the 3 top BRICS, let's put it this way. They already entered their official application. And my interlocutors in Istanbul, even those that are deeply skeptical of Erdogan, they said, this time is for real. He really wants it because, he analyzed the chessboard, even though he's not a very good strategist, but he's a canny operator. And he said, no, the future is Eurasia, and I cannot be outside of it. Outside of the table at BRICS, outside of the table Shanghai Cooperation Organization. For Turkey, who wants to be a major Eurasian power, no way.
The prospects of Turkey joining into BRICS, that seems to be the direction they're headed, is incredible. You talk about de-dollarization, you talk about the changing world order. I mean, Turkey has one of the most important militaries within NATO, and now they could be leaving. Do you think that Turkey could kind of take the path of Saudi Arabia, where they hedge their bets and they say, yeah, we really want to join, and then when the time comes and they say, yeah, let's have you join BRICS, they're kind of going to play the waiting game, or do you think they're actually serious this time?
Well, considering what we know about Erdogan, he would be hedging his bets till kingdom come. But I'm sure in these 3 bilaterals with Putin, Xi, and Modi, they're going to say, okay, man, that's it. You're either in or out. We already have a Saudi Arabian issue, which they plan to solve, by the way, in Kazan. Are you in or out? It's complicated, but considering Turkish interests in terms of expanding Turkish presence all across Central Asia, that very interesting organization of Turkic states, which when you go there and talk to them in Istanbul, they cannot explain exactly what they do. But what we think they're doing is expanding commercial ties with Central Asian nations, and even what they call Turkestan. You know how they are calling Xinjiang in China? They call it Turkestan. So this is already a big problem with China. This is not the official Chinese denomination of the Western lands of China. So this could be a problem. Russia will understand that because they have a substantial Muslim population inside Russia. But the thing is, can they actually trust Erdogan, and what comes afterwards? Because something that it's always discussed in Istanbul, the Turkish establishment and the ruling classes, they are 90% Atlanticist and pro-NATO. How they're going to take that? Is Erdogan could be in a very fragile position negotiating with them. Some of them support and some of them are, it's the Turkish opposition, but up there, you see. So his role at the moment is crucial, because if he opts to join both BRICS and the SCO, then the whole thing tilts towards Eurasia integration. If he stays in the middle, it's the status quo that we have today, which is undefined.
Can you talk about the relationship between BRICS and the SCO, and also briefly touch on some of the major topics that are going to be up for discussion at the BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia? I mean, it's next week or in a couple weeks?
It starts October 22nd, Tuesday, next week, absolutely. It's very interesting because you start to hear this from some Russian ministers. We already heard from Lukashenko directly. We heard tentative explanations by Chinese scholars that in the end the BRICS and the SCO could merge. And it would not take too long. This is something that could happen within the next, realistically, 3 to 4 to 5 years. Because basically they are doing the same thing in different angles. The SCO started in 2001, a long time ago. Nobody in the West talked about the SCO as a counter-terrorist body, essentially. Russia, China, and Central Asian stance. It evolved into a geoeconomic integration mechanism. I went to some of their roundtables since the late 2000s. And it's fascinating. You could see that it was changing. And one of the last ones that I've been to was like 4 or 5 years ago, for instance. They only talked about economics. They didn't even mention anti-terrorism because they consider that everybody has the same position. And now, very important, they're bringing Afghanistan into the SCO. Why? Because the main actors in the SCO, let's put it apart from the Central Asian stance, Russia, China, India, Iran, and Pakistan. Everybody wants a stable Afghanistan, and you're not going to have the endless derivations of Al-Qaeda using Afghanistan like in the past. So it's normalizing Afghanistan. Russia, for instance, the Taliban is not going to be considered a terrorist organization in Russia anymore. First step. Second step, the Russian envoy to Kabul, he has excellent relations with the Taliban. And he's more, I wouldn't say teaching, but explaining to the Taliban how it works, the system of international relations. And they are learning. They were at the Vladivostok Forum, for instance, discussing geoeconomic integration. Absolutely. Can you imagine this? A year ago, you couldn't even imagine something like this. So it's for the interest of all the major players at the SCO. And of course, BRICS as well, because major players at the SCO include major players at BRICS as well, including Iran, which is now a full member of BRICS. And when Turkey comes, if Turkey comes in relatively quickly, they will also want Afghanistan in terms of opportunities for Turkish companies to develop Afghanistan all over again. So it suits everybody. It doesn't suit one player. I don't need to name it, right?
Yeah. But it's it is interesting. I mean, you look at India, and they're completely surrounded by all these countries that are uniting and being very positively influenced in terms of security, even building up some ports that could be used for military infrastructure, economic development, all these things. And they don't seem intent on trying to revive any sort of close relationships with India, and they seem very okay with the idea of uniting with China, despite the bad blood that's going to create with India. So how could India and China possibly reconcile these differences? India is not a full member of the SCO. They're part of the bank.
No, they are, Jackson. They are, but they are not, I would say, not very effective inside the SCO.
They're in SCO?
They are, and they're passive. They're not active. The active actors are especially Russia and China, once again. India is a full member. When Pakistan came in, India came in as well. The problem is India has problems with China and with Pakistan. So we come back to the same thing that Lavrov told us earlier this year. First, we need to solve the internal conflicts in these organizations. Inside BRICS, inside SCO. In the case of SCO is this triad, India, China, Pakistan. They have serious issues to discuss. And once again, we hope that Russia is the only mediator with the gravitas to put them on the same table. Now you have to solve your problem. Within BRICS is the same thing. Like Putin has the gravitas to call Xi and Modi to the same room in those BRICS summits. They say, now you talk directly to one another. Fascinating. But there's another thing which is even more interesting. And I got confirmation from Iranians a few days ago in Istanbul. Do you know who lobbied most to get Iran inside BRICS? It was not China, it was India.
Really?
And you know why? It made sense, and it makes sense because of the transportation corridor, the international transportation corridor, which is Russia, Iran, and India. And India relies deeply on Iran to open the doors for Indian trade in Central Asia, including Afghanistan, which is Central Asia, South Asia, and the Caucasus as well, and Russia as well. So for India, the economic importance of Iran is enormous. So this is good because relations between Iran and Pakistan are getting better. So this might have a spillover effect on relations between Pakistan and India. But this is very hypothetical because there's a lot of bad blood, and it hasn't been solved yet.
I'm surprised by that, and I said before we started this conversation that I always learn a lot when I talk to you. But I'm surprised by that because it was just a few days ago or weeks ago when Netanyahu was up at the United Nations in Manhattan and he was holding up, the curse and the future, whatever the other sign said. The curse was like Iran, China, everything
is
like that.
number one of the curse now, you remember?
But the trade routes through China, through Iran, all these things, and then the savior of the future, whatever the other thing he was holding up, it looked like India.
Yes, but you know why? Because he was thinking about the IMEC, which is, let's say, the American-Israeli response to the Chinese New Silk Roads. IMEC basically is Israel as at the center, United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, Europe here, and India here. So it will be a trade route where Israel will have a defining role. We know this is not going to happen, especially because it goes against BRICS. And it goes against India's interest in privileging Central Asia, South Asia, and of course West Asia, but later, because they know as long as we don't have a solution, a peaceful solution in West Asia, it's impossible to think about it. Even though the Chinese are already thinking about it. The Chinese want West Asia as a new Silk Road corridor. But they started the thing 11 years ago. India is starting now, you see. They have a huge head start. So there is a competition between Silk Roads, let's put it this way. And the Indians are betting on their version of the Silk Road, where Afghanistan is very important, and Iran as well. And for China, everybody is important in the Silk Road. That's the difference. Because they saw, when they came up with the Silk Road concept in 2013, it was not only geopolitical and geoeconomic, but the fusion of both. Only the Chinese could have the means, the funds, and the vision to implement that,
Do you think that the idea of creating a new currency is going to be officially tabled at this BRICS summit in Kazan?
No, unfortunately, Jackson, this is an extremely complex issue with no easy solutions. Last Friday, there was the meeting of the ministers of finance and the heads of central banks here in Moscow. They published the final declaration. I read the final declaration this weekend and I said, oh my God, this is too vague. It's not bold enough. Is that it? Is there anything else they're not telling us? Apparently that's it for the moment. So they're proceeding very cautiously. This week we're going to have meetings of working groups and the BRICS Business Council. So this is going to be more fact-based, But next week, we're not going to have an announcement at the summit. Okay, we're coming up with our new BRICS currency. No, they're going to come up with different systems of payment settlements and more commerce and trade using their own currencies. This is the first step. Then they will expand this to what they call BRICS Outreach, which is BRICS Plus, plus the partners. That includes Turkey, for instance, Kazakhstan, countries in Africa, etc. And then later on, we can have, when everybody, means governments and big companies are using payment settlements bypassing the dollar, you can start thinking about perhaps the Russian project, the unit, which is an apolitical unit based on gold, currencies of the BRICS nations. But this is and when we talk about this here in Moscow, the first thing that finance tech guys say is, look, if we manage to sell this to big companies, everybody's going to jump in. If you have gigantic state companies in Russia and China transacting this way, governments will look at it and say, oops, excellent, let's use it as well. It's what they, for the moment, they call this thing BRICS Pay. which is based on the M-Bridge system. That's complicated because this is directly linked to the IMF and the European Central Bank, and worse, the Bank of International Settlements. This means this is a Western system, but it's starting to work. And the best example that it's available everywhere for everybody that can look into it. For instance, the Emirates are selling oil to Thailand, and Thailand, they don't pay in Thai baht or whatever. They pay in the M-Bridge thing, which is a apolitical unit. So you can expand this to the BRICS. And I'm sure this is something that Saudi Arabia would love. For instance, selling their oil to China. And China doesn't pay in Saudi Arabia currency or in yuan. They pay with this unit. Mm-hmm. So this has a wonderful traction ahead. So, for instance, this weekend I was talking to a top Brazilian economist who's here in Moscow discussing alternative forms of payment with including Alexei Mosin, which is the Russian guy at the IMF, who's probably going to be the next head of the new development bank in Shanghai. And they're all, it's interesting because this is parallel to BRICS, it's not part of BRICS. So you have these top experts from BRICS countries say, okay, let's come up with our own ideas and then we put it on the table, let's see what they say. The great thing, Jack, is that the whole thing is moving all the time. Yeah.
It's moving all the time. Critics will say it's moving too slowly.
Yes, we can say that it's moving too slowly because the complexity of these issues is something, wow, it's really mind-boggling. For instance, when I'm here, since last year, I'm learning. I am a student on this matter. And when they have briefings that last 2 or 3 hours explaining the complexity, wow, considering they're making huge steps.
It's a new world.
You are creating a new system of international relations and a new system of payment settlements from scratch, literally. And you have to accommodate the members, and they have different priorities. Now, India's priorities compared to Saudi Arabia is a completely different ballgame. Mm-hmm. And they're still managing to do it,
You wrote an article that was republished in Zero Hedge.
Yes.
You sent it to me, and I thought it was incredible. I encourage everyone to read it. Maybe we can link it below in the description for all of you. But, you were discussing with a number of sources, including Michael Hudson, the two avenues in which the new development bank and this new system could go, essentially as a full challenge to the IMF, as an alternative to these Western systems, or as something that will operate to try and gain concessions, it seemed like you were describing, from the IMF that would be preferable to the multi-nodal world. Mm-hmm. Based on the meetings that took place in Russia this past week, was there any sort of direction that seemed to be taken with regard to these two alternatives as to how they're actually going to develop this new economic system?
Not confronting the Bretton Woods institutions head on. It's very dangerous. It might be counterproductive. And they know that the retortion by the Americans is going to be ultra hardcore. So no, it's, let's say, the Chinese way, a Sun Tzu way, You get the force of the adversary and you absorb it, and then there's your counterpunch that is subtle. Mm-hmm. This is what we see coming from the Chinese and the Russians, especially, which are deeply involved in trying to find an alternative payment system and trying to, little by little, escape from the IMF. The NDB, the BRICS bank in Shanghai, is essential because it should work as a real alternative to the World Bank, and at the moment, that's not the case. Mm-hmm. If we have we're going to have a Russian presidency next year. And it's probably going to be Mosin. And Mosin knows the IMF from the inside. So once again, this is Sun Tzu. Mm-hmm. What he learned working inside the IMF, he can use to undermine it softly. Which is this is an approach that the Chinese endorse right away, because this is what they're doing. The Chinese don't want to have the yuan tomorrow as the new reserve currency of the world. No. They want to have the yuan as an international currency, but they want a basket of currencies for BRICS and for countries that are partners of BRICS, much more than the dollar or the euro or the yen in international transactions. And that's where we're going, slowly, subtly, and with these endless discussions, of course, and trying to solve internal contradictions between the BRICS members and inside the NDB itself, the BRICS Bank. Mm-hmm. The statutes of the bank are based on the US dollar. How can you go against the US dollar when you're using their currency? It's impossible. So you have to, the statutes have to be rewritten to the profit of a basket of currencies at the NDB. So the NDB, okay, somebody, an associate of the NDB, let's say Uruguay, look, we need a loan. Say, okay, we're going to give you the loan in a basket of currencies. And you pay the way you want it. You can use the M bridge if you want to pay us back and all that. The interests are much lower than IMF and World Bank. So that's where we're going. But once again, Jackson, it's slow, painful.
Do you think that the contradictions that are being sorted out and what some might say the slow nature in which it's taking shape, is this a result of maybe leadership issues, or do you think it's just this is really how complex it is?
It is. It's extremely complex. And they don't disguise it, especially here. People at the Russian Ministry of Finance, for instance, Chinese scholars, Chinese economists, people who understand how the NDB in Shanghai works, they are very realistic. They're absolutely top professionals, very realistic. They say, look, this is a long-term project. We're starting now. And in fact, the drive for real change started only this year under the Russian presidency. So let's say this year is year zero of the new system, So we are right at the beginning. Yes,
how long does the Russian presidency last?
1 year. So at the end of this year, they will pass the baton to the Brazilians, which is very complicated because Brazil, wow, I won't even start. I'll give you just an example based on the conversation that I had this weekend in here. The summit of the BRICS next year is not going to be at the end of the year, like here, October, because then you have the full year to discuss, develop policies, etc. In Brazil, it's going to be in July. And then I ask, why?
July of
2035. I said, but in July, you had a presidency lasting only 6 months, so you're not able to implement anything. Because they have the COP, the climate change thing at the end of the year, so they need a few months extra to organize the COP. I say, but who took this decision? And the answer was, it's worse, it's irreversible. So we were discussing possibilities. They said, well, so maybe the G20 next year is going to be in South Africa, which is probably going to be November 2025, South Africa. Maybe the BRICS could have a parallel meeting of the leaders, because they're going to be in South Africa anyway. And then they have the recap of the year, because you cannot do the recap of the year in July, right? So this is just a small example to our audience of how complicated the whole thing is, especially when you change presidencies. The Russian presidency this year, they were very effective. They worked like hell. They had more than 200 meetings on everything, and still is not ready. Because this document of this joint statement last Friday of the ministers of finance and the heads of the central bank, they arrived at the last minute, literally. It was not ready. And the final papers that they're going to show to the leaders, they won't be ready until the end of this week. That's 3 or 4 days before the start of the summit. So it's really last minute because, once again, how complex it is, and you have to negotiate all the internal contradictions.
It seems like we're so far away, but one of the last things that Michael Hudson mentioned in the piece in Zero Hedge that you wrote was he was talking about what is kind of the pinnacle of his answer to the world's issues, the imperialist order, and that's forgiving the debt.
Yes.
And for those of you who are not familiar with that, I mean, I encourage you to read Michael Hudson's books and super imperialism in particular. But basically, the way that he argues is the most sound to break the chain of this, hegemony of the U.S. dollar is through breaking the debt structure.
Exactly. And break FIRE, Jackson. Debt structure and the FIRE system.
Talk about
finance, insurance, and real estate speculation, which is the basis of this. Well, Michael is not only an American treasure, he's a global treasure.
Yeah.
He's absolutely extraordinary, especially because he's been working on this for over 50 years. And he said something incredible, Jackson. He said, I wish I was there in Kazan to discuss this with them.
Why is he not there?
I know. The BRICS Council, they should have invited Michael for the summit. And, okay, give 15, 20 minutes for Michael so he can explain his idea of post-Bretton Woods system. And I would say he's the number one in the world who already more or less codified what should be done. Get rid of the debt, of course, for the whole global majority, which is the basis of IMF and World Bank loans with structural adjustment conditionalities. And, of course, how to organize the progressive squashing of the FIRE system, which is basically casino capitalism, or what we call turbo neoliberalism, whatever you want to call it, exploitation of the global south, essentially. But this is a project for the rest of the century, I would say, not for only a BRICS summit. It could start now, and Michael should have been there.
Well, that's exactly what I think. I think he should be very involved, and, I wish and I hope and I pray that Mike will have a long career. But for audience who doesn't know Michael, he's in his 80s, but now 70s, 80s.
80s, yes.
So you talk about a preeminent expert
Super
like that.
Sharp.
So sharp, the sharpest.
Yeah, the sharpest.
But we need to take advantage, I think, of the brilliant minds like Michael Hudson for this project. While we have them, we don't want to say, this is something for the future. No, let's listen to what he has to say right now, and take that and run with that when it's possible. If it's my lifetime, if it's future generations' lifetime, whatever it is, I hope it's sooner than that. But it's concerning that they're not.
And his advice for the new development bank as well. So next year, for instance, under the Russian presidency, I'm sure they're going to start a dialogue with Michael, and Michael can suggest a lot of stuff for how to revamp the BRICS bank.
I think that'd be very good. One last question about this. It came out this week. I'm sure this is public knowledge for everyone now because it's been shared on social media. But Russia announced that they have 92% of their trade with Belarus is non-dollar. 90% of their trade with China, non-dollar. India, only 50%. And they didn't even, I haven't seen the reports on the other BRICS partners or BRICS Plus partners. But, when you see this, it's like China, Belarus, okay, they're very close, but India, South Africa, Brazil, I mean, how long can we expect it, or do we not really know how long it's going to take to get to the China-Belarus numbers with these other nations? Because that seems to be where we need to go before we move to this potential alternative to Bretton Woods.
Hopefully, Jackson, until the end of this decade, let's say 2030. Because coming back to it's not inauspicious. In fact, it's very dangerous imperative of this change of international relations and geoeconomic, the forever wars. The war in Ukraine won't end even if next year Russia, according to Moscow, we fulfilled our targets. Even if that happened, there will be a revamp of NATO's war. NATO is starting to prepare itself for a war against Russia anytime from 2027 to 2030, depending on the projections, depending on NATO internal documents, you name it. But there will be 2.0 in this war. And of course, West Asia, which is the most insoluble international relations problem in modern history. And we know that is going downhill as we speak. So who's going to rein in the scatological cult in Tel Aviv? We don't know. There's only one actor capable of doing, and we know that this actor won't do it. So this can get totally out of control. And then if, we hope not, this gets out of control, is going to pit on one side the US, Israel, and the support of the collective West against BRICS, Eurasia. Russia and China supporting Iran. They have interlocking strategic partnerships. The strategic partnership between Iran and Russia is going to be signed here after the BRICS with a special visit by President Pezeshkian, who's going to sign it with Putin.
Really?
And this includes military high-level collaboration, which, by the way, it's already on.
Wow.
S-400 systems, Russians are already in Iran.
That's true?
Yes, this is true. This is true, but obviously this cannot be said in public.
Yeah.
But it's confirmed by very, very good sources.
The right people.
Yeah, the right people. And can you imagine after they signed the partnership? Because there are no limits. Since last year there were a lot of Iranian delegations coming to Russia, negotiating everything. And already last year they were saying, we told the Russians, look, anything you need, just ask. And the Russians said, likewise. Wow. So this has been going on for at least 18 months. It didn't start last week with the Russians saying, no, we're going to support Iran. Basically, the Russians are saying this, straight away. Look, if there is an attack against Iran, we're going to support Iran. They don't get into details, but we know what it means. Exchange of satellite information, electronic warfare, which the Russians are top of the line, the S-400s, etc. So we hope it doesn't get to that. And apparently, and this, we still don't have a smoking gun. The Pentagon understood the message that Putin sent in terms of the revamping of the Russian nuclear doctrine, and in case of an existential attack against Russia. Apparently, politicians in the US, as you know well, Jackson, they didn't get it, but the Pentagon, they did get it. And they have to do it. These are the guys who will be implementing the launching of the nuclear missiles if it ever comes to that. So this is a good thing, because this, in a certain sense, diffused the 1 minute to midnight that we were a month ago or so, But the problem is, if we, depending on what we have after U.S. presidential elections, and considering that the Zionist lobby controls both sides, essentially, as you know well, this can get out of control like this.
You said you think there's going to be a NATO-Russia 2.0 part to this Ukraine special military operation. Later. Years. But I mean, do you think it's going to, this special military operation will come to a close before that one opens up, the 2.0 will open up?
Possibly. Possibly, because considering how the front line is really collapsing, and we're watching it every day. So there are many possible scenarios for the next, let's say, 6 to 8 months, including a total collapse of the front line. That's now a very plausible scenario. And then, once again, we're going to have to reevaluate the ceasefire angle. The Americans will certainly try to propose a ceasefire, and the Russians already said, no, this will be decided in the battlefield under our conditions. We already spelled that out, and that's it. We don't trust anything that comes from Washington. And they have reasons to. Minsk Accords, you name it. Revoking nuclear treaties, you name it. So very dangerous. And of course, NATO, they follow their own American-driven agenda, but with a very peculiar concept of NATO. This is basically London, Warsaw, the Scandinavians, and the Baltic Chihuahuas. And in NATO's planning, these are the people who are going to fight against Russia in 2030. Yes, all of you, audience, please laugh about it, because they actually devise these plans and they actually believe in these plans.
Poland's threatening, did I see nukes or something? It's like,
No, let's bomb St. Petersburg.
yeah, bomb St. Petersburg, that's what they said. Oh, God. Yeah. Dumber military strategist than even Hitler and his team. But
Absolutely.
That's where we're headed.
They never learn.
No.
No, they don't. They don't learn, and it's fascinating to discuss this with the informed players here in Moscow because they can barely contain their smirk when they're talking about it. Yes, these people never learn.
But okay? So we talk about that. The other question I had that was kind of related was. We are in the middle of a regional conflict in the Middle East, that's for sure. I mean, everyone was always talking about, like, could this turn into a regional conflict, what we're seeing in Gaza? We're already there. But the question is, how much does it escalate? How much does it escalate? And, the U.S. has a lot more to lose. They just deployed troops. The United States just deployed troops, not a lot.
100.
But they deployed troops, not since 2003 or 1991.
You're absolutely right. One THAAD battery, which is not going to make a lot of difference, and 100,000 troops around the THAAD and support, etc. This is not. Do you think the IRGC and Hezbollah are trembling in their boots? Of course not.
But this is the ladder for escalation. It's how it
Yes.
always starts. It's, we're just sending some French troops to Ukraine so they can train the Ukrainians. And then, they're just doing defensive stuff now. And then, now they're manning artillery positions.
Remember Vietnam? It started like this.
Yeah.
It started with only a few hundred troops.
Yep.
So, once again, they never learn, unfortunately.
But the U.S., if they do decide to escalate, I mean, you're talking about getting wiped out of the Gulf. You're talking about getting wiped out by the, Iraqi militias. You're talking about lots of big problems probably for all the U.S. warships in the region. Most importantly, you're talking about maybe no oil leaving the Middle East and these Gulf states, the family monarchies, whatever, their infrastructure getting targeted in a big way. It's not Ansar Allah from 2015. We're in a new era. So do you really see like a major escalation playing out here? Do you think they're that stupid?
They are that stupid. Okay, let's not generalize. Politically, yes, they are that stupid. I would say there are people in the Pentagon who have IQ over room temperature, to quote our friend Martianov. Yeah. Did you see, Jackson? Did you see what happened with the GCC, the U.S. and Israel and Iran? Iran diplomatically, very important, which is not the Wall Street Journal version because it's bullshit, because they don't have these sources in Iran on the ground. Iran diplomatically, they called the GCC members and said, look, it's very simple. If you allow U.S. and Israel to overfly your territories for an attack on Iran, there are going to be consequences. You know what happened next? You got everybody on the phone, MBS, MBZ, the Kuwait, Bahrain, etc., calling the Americans and say, please tell the Israelis not to do this because we are going to pay the price. So this is how it works. Iran didn't threat anybody because now they have high-level conversations at the foreign ministry level. And even, I would say, MBS and Pezeshkian are already talking underground, of course, and now they are part of the same table. Mm-hmm. Assuming the Saudi Arabians are in the BRICS table, which we still don't know, right? So this was a diplomatic way of telling the GCC, look, that's it, no threats, but you know what that means. Mm-hmm. And of course, you know as well that we have, Russia and China have our back. And this is something that the Saudis, the Emiratis, they understand very well. And they don't want to antagonize Russia and China on top of antagonizing Iran. So you see that the whole configuration is little by little is changing in front of our eyes, in ways that we could never expect a year ago.
Yeah. The world is changing quickly. How do you think it's going to potentially change at this next BRICS summit? Do you think we'll see any new official members, or are they going to hold off on that for maybe another 6 months or a year or something like that?
Yes, this is what Lavrov told us, Jackson, earlier this year. No new members 2024 during our presidency. First, we need to accommodate the new ones, which was Lavrov's speak for, internal contradictions, China and India start to, polish their game on both sides. And of course, the Saudi Arabia angle, which is still very complicated, hedging their bets all the time. Next year, yes, the list for next year, it's over 34 nations. It was 34 until months ago. Now it's probably 36, 7, 8. And some that were invited for Kazan as part of official denomination BRICS outreach, which is basically BRICS plus. BRICS plus partners. Turkey is part of this group, very important. And Southeast Asia, we have 5 Southeast Asian powerhouses who already, official application, want to be a member of BRICS. Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand. Myanmar is not a powerhouse, but it's a very important country strategically.
Yeah.
They also want to be part of, and they have very good relations with Russia. So we have half of Southeast Asia want to be part of it, and everybody at BRICS said, great, because they do good business with South. India and China both, they do outstanding business with Southeast Asia, so it's very important. So, but this is going to be, let's see what the Brazilians will do next year, because this will fall under the Brazilian responsibility, absorbing new members. And considering that Brazil is, I'm being very diplomatic, very wobbly in international relations, including because there is an anti-BRICS lobby in Brazil linked to American interests, which are extremely powerful in Brazil. So this is going to be very hard for the Lula government to negotiate.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I hope it all works out, but I don't have much faith in, I don't know, I don't have a whole lot of faith in the leadership in Brazil. Maybe that's just me as an American knowing how much we've intervened in Brazil over the past, well, not just several years, but for a long time, but especially the past several years. It makes me a little bit worried. What do you think we're going to expect from, what do you think we could expect from a potential Trump presidency? Because he's going up in the polls, and he's like the only candidate that is talking about de-dollarization, BRICS. I don't think he understands it, but I think he's got people around him who understand it. And he's saying, he's like, we're going to drop all the sanctions. Will he do it? Probably not. Maybe. I don't know. But he's saying we're going to drop all the sanctions on Iran and Russia. We're going to fight de-dollarization because de-dollarization is worse than an invasion of the United States. That's what he said. So what do you make of that? I mean, how do you fight something that seems so, it seems like it's impossible to stop this process, other than if you start wars and coups and things like this?
Exactly, Jackson, because this is a historical process. And this high-speed train has already left the station. So what are you going to do? You're going to launch an overarching war against all the BRICS? I'm not sure Trump understands what would that mean in the end. And very, very important, once again, coming back to it's not even an elephant. I would say it's a horde of elephants in a very small room, the forever wars.
Yeah.
So what if the Zionist lobby is powerful enough to force Trump to escalate in West Asia? This will destabilize everything, including how the BRICS are going to react. Not only Iran, but Russia and China, which are now interlocked with Iran. So will he buy a 3-front war against Iran, Russia, and China? No way. Even his craziest advisors, and he has a lot of crazy advisors. He has competent people around him, no question. But he has a lot of crazy advisors, previously of the John Bolton variety, for instance. And these people, they haven't left. So it's very, very dangerous. And we hope that he understands that the chessboard that he's going to inherit probably now is not the same thing as 2016, 2017. It's a completely different ball game. At the time, between 17 and 18, he launched that tsunami of sanctions against China. The Chinese absorbed it. They changed the name of what they were doing. They had this modernization process called Made in China 2025. Like in 2025, next year, we're going to be the top 10 or among the top 7 or 8 in all these high-tech domains. Yeah. They kept doing the same thing, but they dropped Made in China 2025, and they absorbed the sanctions. So this already shows you that sanctions, obviously, is not going to work. And buying a three-front war, obviously, is not going to work for the U.S. So he will be in a bind. He will have to sit down and really negotiate. Then we're going to see if he's still capable of the art of semi-deal, let's put it this way. Now. He's going to have to be a true negotiator this time.
That's all. It seems like the only way.
The only way.
Fair deals.
Yes, fair deals. Exactly.
I don't think the U.S. or the IMF. I don't think World Bank. No one's capable of.
No, it's what Michael says. When Michael talks about a post-Bretton Woods or a Bretton Woods 3, this is what he means. Mm-hmm. It's to go over the system that was established after the end of the Second World War, just like the UN. The UN established after the end of it doesn't work anymore. Everybody knows that. And with this eternal U.S. veto power, everybody's screaming about this for decades and nothing happens.
Pepe, you're going to be heading to Kazan for the BRICS summit.
Yes.
I hope I get to join you, but I don't know.
No,
so we'll see.
We'll meet there, in front of the Kremlin.
Okay. What exactly are you going to be working on at the BRICS summit in Kazan? Are you going to be speaking? Are you going to be talking? What are you going to be doing there? And where can people follow along? I know your Telegram's amazing. I told you that already. But where can people follow your work and your writings while you're there?
Yes. All of us observers, we cannot intervene on anything. We are there as observers. So we will follow what happens and the decisions of the leaders together. So at the end, obviously, they have the typical press conference, which I hope is going to be substantial this year, because there are so many important dossiers at the same time. And I hope that the top leaders will be at this press conference, because the whole planet will be paying attention, literally. Especially the global majority will be paying attention. So what I'll be doing is I'll be writing for these publications afterwards. And while I'm there, I'll try to have some little interventions with Russian media, with probably American podcasts as well, to try to explain to the audiences what are the hidden games over there. Because there are going to be some very hot last-minute deliberations. Mm-hmm. I can imagine that table with the BRICS 9.5, if we consider Saudi Arabia. So the BRICS 9.5, can you imagine that table in 22nd, 23rd, 24th? And they need a substantial conclusion for this.
It's going to be hot.
Wow, and I couldn't imagine something more challenging for them. And their historical responsibility, because this would be let's say the first stone, on Kazan soil. Okay, the new system starts now with us.
We'll have to wait and see. I'm looking forward to reading all your analysis. So thank you so much for joining me here today.
We'll be there together, Jack. Thanks.
God willing. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks very much.
All right, everybody. Pepe Escobar, amazing as always. We will be back tomorrow with another special guest, so I will see you all next time. Be sure to drop a like, retweet, share this with whoever. Share with your ex-girlfriend, your grandma. I don't know who you need to share with, but the world needs to know what's happening. The world is changing very quickly, and we're here to expose the truth about it all. So thank you so much. I'll see you all next time. God bless you all.